I am joined by artist Phil Jupitus, whose exhibition What We Did in the Plague, an international COVID-19 project, is on at the Minories Gallery between 4th of July and 16th of August. We're going to talk about Phil's career in art, the exhibition, and how you can get to see it. Hello, Phil.
Hiya.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Okay, firstly, can you tell our listeners what impact art has had throughout your life and what your first experience as an artist producing works was?
I suppose, my mum was a trained artist, and she was at art school in the 1950s, which is quite a sort of, fruitful time, shall we say, for artists. So she was at art school, around about the same time as people like Peter Blake and David Hockney, who we've sadly just lost. That era. I mean, she was in Southwest Essex Tech. Well, they were all up in London at the posh schools, but it was the same sort of time. And so whenever I see, footage of people like Hockney or Pauline Boaty or Peter Blake in the early days, it kind of helps me sort of see that that's the vibe my mum was having as well, but, albeit on a slightly reduced scale. I know that she was really into jazz and stuff like that. So art, it wasn't much long after that she had me. So I was born in 62, and when she left college, she worked briefly for Liberties as a textile designer. That was her gig. And then, I came along, and I think that if you've got a parent who's an artist, who is still a practicing artist, it's interesting because you take as normal all those things like about there being art materials, about the fact that visual creativity is not something that's like special or just for play. It's just a general sort of part of your life, and that's the way it certainly was for me. I was always encouraged to pick up a pencil or a crayon and do stuff. Mum was very sort of positive in that direction, and she also taught me to read really early, and we were never shy about having comics around. There's an early photograph of me and my mum from sort of 1965, and I'm sat on a sofa with her and she's reading The Dandy. So we always... The first book I remember reading as a kid was Asterix and Cleopatra. Not that I could knew what the words meant, I just liked the pictures. And so, having that sort of awareness of visual creativity, I think, at an early age, that sort of stuck with me. It was always art that I enjoyed and got the most out of. I wasn't necessarily very good compared to some of the people I was at school with. They were much more kind of. I was more into it made me feel that I will produce something that looks like the thing I'm, trying to replicate. I just used to like, holding a crayon and making a mess.
What's wrong with that? Now, in 2018, you started a fine art degree. So what motivated you to do that? What did it involve?
So, I suppose because before I became a performer, my earliest form of sort of doing something bigger than myself, I was a cartoonist for sort of music fanzines and football fanzines and things. And then that led into me also writing poetry, and that led into performance poetry, and that fed into being a stand-up. But there was a kind of line, but the visual art side was always sort of in the background. And that's something that you do on your own at home, and I think that's what I liked about it, was it kept me sort of anchored to a studio space. And so I'd always kept my hand in, even when I was a performance poet and working with bands and things. I was a tour manager. I say a tour manager, I was more like a morale officer for a band called the House Martins when they went on tour in 1986. And I designed their first T-shirt, and I used to design posters for them, things like that. So I was like an in-house kind of, he knows what to do with a pen, let him draw the poster, that sort of thing. So I'd do quite a bit of that. And so art was sort of always around, and I kept doing it. I worked with a I worked with a designer in Southeast London for a while, and he taught me how to do cut and paste and form layout. And so this was just before digital design came in. So I was like one of the last people to be taught the old way of doing layout and stuff for design and posters and things. So I was really glad that I got the opportunity to do that, because literally a year later, everyone was doing stuff on PCs and Macs, and so the old ways,
including Hockney.
Yeah. Well, I like that the old artists kind of saw this new stuff, and they were. It's interesting because like it's Hockney, ran wild with it. It was great. I remember being at the Larne Festival some years ago, and John Cooper Clarke was on, and I used to do drawings on an iPad, and so I drew Clarkey, and I was at breakfast the next morning, and I was sat opposite Peter Blake, and he was like, "What's that you were doing yesterday at John's gig?" And I went, "Oh, I was drawing him on this iPad." And I showed him the drawings. He went, "Oh yeah, they're very interesting. Yeah, very interesting." And I thought, right, I got Peter Blake here, and I kind of got a blank page up, and I went, "Yeah, you just do this." And I drew a few lines, and then erased them, and then I kind of handed him the iPad, and he just looked at it, and he went, "Yes, very interesting," and gave it back to me without putting a finger on the screen. And so my chance of having the first Peter Blake digital drawing, I think he was very aware that was what I was doing. It was what became a bit embarrassing, really. Just this odd moment. But from my point of view, the art school idea, I was at the opening of the new V&A Museum in Dundee, and Janice Aitken, who's one of the lecturers at Duncan of Jordanston School of Art in Dundee, came up to me and she said, "I heard you the other day on Radio 4 talking about how, you're not sure how your life would have gone if you'd gone to art school because you taught yourself art." And I was like, "Yeah." She said, "Well, why don't you come to art school now?" And I was like, she said, "I work at one, why don't you come to it?" And I'm like, "What do I have to do?" And she gave me a few links and this, that and the other, and I looked into it. And I threw a portfolio together of all the old work that I'd done, because I'd never stopped doing it, albeit on a very part-time basis. And also recently my wife had returned to study art when we were living down in Essex still. So she'd done a 3-year degree. So there was a lot, again, I'm around it, even though I was still just doing things like buzzcocks and touring. There was still art being made at home when I started to get a bit curious. And so after Janice had said, "Why don't you apply?" I looked into it and I applied and I got in. And it was interesting really, because it just felt like, having moved to Scotland, I'd sort of removed myself from the world of sort of comedy, and I just didn't feel like doing it. I just didn't feel part of it anymore. I think some comedians will always be brilliant, doesn't matter what age. Age is irrelevant, but I do feel that you can't replicate that youthful energy that young comics have. And whenever I see people who I used to work with in the 80s still doing stand-up, some of them are amazing, some of them are not. So I didn't want to be, I didn't have enough confidence in myself that I could still do it. And so I thought, why don't I just stop? And going to uni seemed a perfect kind of way to not have to do telly anymore. So I went to art school, and that was a bit of a up and down time. As while I was at art school, I lost both my parents, sort of my father first and then my mother in my last year, and I never completed the course. Me and the University of Dundee had a bit of a falling out over this, because when my mother was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is a form of brain cancer, when she was diagnosed, I was 6 weeks from finishing. So 6 weeks from the finish line. But when my dad got ill, I tried to carry on studying and was going back and forth up and down the UK, and it kind of didn't work. And so I went to Janice and I said, look, my mum's got brain cancer, what can I do? And she said, well, you can actually just like press pause. You can actually just stop for if it's an important personal reason, and come back later and finish. And I'm brilliant. So I said, I applied to the admin people. I said, can I stop? I mean, of course you can. And I went off and I stayed with mum till she went sort of about 8 months later. And about a year after my mum died, I got an email from Dundee University saying, we were wondering if you might want to come back and finish your degree off. And I thought, oh yeah, that might be, and I thought mum would like that if I actually got a degree, And so I said, yeah, oh cool, what do I have to do? Because I was only 6 weeks from finishing, so what do I do? Do I just like do a dissertation and then produce a final set of work? And they went, oh no, we want you to do the whole last year again. And I'm like, you know what, I'm 63. I've got better things to do in my time. So I said, no, you're all right. The other thing was I was covered under living in Scotland. Education is free, which as it should be in England and Wales as well. I was only paying like a nominal fee, but it was still, my grant had ostensibly run out because I'd had all of my grant up to that point. So if I'd gone back, I would have had to pay. And I'm like, well, part of the reason I did it was that's why some people do the education, because it's offered to you and it's not going to ruin your life like, university education would now. Who wants to go to university and put themselves into 70 grand's worth of debt like that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just absurd. So anyway, I didn't finish the degree, but the funny thing is, I suppose what I did was I went to art school. The reason I went was because I always wondered if I'd missed anything by not going. And yeah, it turns out I hadn't.
So let's talk in detail about the exhibition at the Minories, which I'm very excited about seeing. Can you explain to our listeners what they'll be able to see, the motivation you have for creating it?
So it's called What We Did in the Plague, and I'll start by saying that when I started doing it, there was no intention that it would be what it is today and what Emma Howe and the people at the Minories have enabled me to turn it into, which is a kind of a standing, existing piece of work about coronavirus. And what it is that, to give you kind of the sort of Brodie's Notes version, a mate of mine called Holly, who's the singer in a band called The Lovely Eggs, sent me their new album at the time. This was back in 2020. The album was called I Am Moron. Brilliant. Fantastic psychedelic punk album, really good. And I got the album and I thought, I'll text them a thank you. And this was like, you have to imagine, this is right in the middle of lockdown. I'm like antiseptic in plastic bags and I'm masked up and all the time, and I'm staying away from people. I haven't seen any other human beings in some months. And I live in the middle of nowhere as it is, so it's like, I'm feeling a bit weird. And I thought, you know what, why should I just text? And I've been having a tidy out of the loft, because that's what everybody did during lockdown. I've been having a tidy out of the loft, and I found my old Polaroid camera that I'd had in the 90s that I used to just take fun snaps with. It was, I had little kids, they loved it, So I found this old Polaroid. I went, I know what I'll do. I'll take a picture of me holding the album in front of my house by the sea and send it to them. So I did that, and I got the picture came out. It slowly appeared like they do with Polaroids, and I'm looking at it. I think that looks a bit boring. And I'd already been collaging a bit, just as a boredom, crusher. And so I just took the Polaroid upstairs to where I did all my collaging, and I just stuck a few bits on it from old magazines and newspapers and, art books and things. It's like, I stuck them all on. I thought, yeah, that looks better. And I sent that to him. And I kept looking at it, and what I always used to do is if I ever made a collage that I really liked, so I'd got a flatbed scanner, and I'd scan it at 300 dpi just in case, because then you could use it again. If you keep a scan of something at a reproducible level of reproduction, you can, you've got the chance of doing something with it. So I scanned it, and I just quite liked it. I thought it was really good. And then I got a mate who's an artist called Peter Liversidge, and I went, I'll send Peter one as well. So I did another photo, and so I did 2 over the course of a couple of days, and it was just really good fun. And then I just thought, I'll send these to some other people. And I had I had 2 packs of film, which is 16 exposures. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, I just kept sending mates. I'd take a picture of myself with the Polaroid, and then I'd stick stuff over it. And then my mate Peter he does something called mail art, which is where he'll get an object like an old wooden ruler, and he'll put a stamp on it, and he'll write my address on it with Tipex. And then we'll chuck the ruler in the post box, just as a kind, and it arrives, and a ruler turns up. The postman's like, right, you got this. I used to I've got loads of things. I've got he sent me a plastic avocado, I've had a ruler, I've had a bit of, the end of a picture frame, from a junk shop or something, and he's put a stamp on it, put my address on it, it's just, there you go. He sent me a paint pot, like if you did decorating, one of them big tin paint pots. But what he did was, to send it was going to cost £2.50. So we got 250 1p stamps and covered this paint pot in these stamps and then written my address on it. This postman is like, who is this bloke? So I just thought, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll just write the address on the back of the Polaroid. And send that, not in an envelope, not wrap it up. And what I liked about that was it's almost like the last bit of the creative process is that the post office have got it. And what are they going to do with it? Will they keep it? Will they damage it? But it's it's been through the post as the last part of the process. And I sort of nicked that off Peter a bit. And so I started sending these out. And then by the time I'd done a dozen, I'm like, I want to do more of these. This is really good fun. And I thought, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 100. And I'm going to send them to mates all over the world. And so I just thought, it'd be great if I could send one to every continent, at least. So, and I kind of started thinking about people I knew, other comedians, sort of other musicians, artists, folk that I know. I've got family in America anyway, so my youngest offspring, they live in Arizona, so they got one. I had a mate, Dave Coulter, who works with Gorillaz, the band. I sent him one in Oakland, in California. I sent one there's a comedian from India called Anuvab Powell, so I sent one to Mumbai. I got a mate that used to work at Sydney Opera House, he got one. And so I'm sending them. There was a fan of mine, this lovely girl called Nastya, and she lives in Siberia. So I sent one to Russia. I sent a lot to Basildon. Don't let me think a lot went to Essex, but at the same time they went all over the world. So it's like, it was really good fun. And then I had all these scans, so I was scanning them before I was sending them. And I did get a print made of all 100 because my cousin works in advertising, and so because he works in advertising in London, he has access to big industrial printers. So I did get a print made of all 100, sort of 10 by 10, and I kind of hung that up on the wall at uni, and the more time I spent with that. And another mate of mine who's an artist, Celie Byrne, she saw it and she said, that's a show, don't you? And I'm like, what? She went, that's an exhibition. It was your response to COVID. So, I never really saw it like that. And so I did it. So I did it 6 years ago. And it was fun to do. And what I liked about it was connected me with friends in a strange way. And they're very kind of, what is this you've sent me? We like it, but what is it? I went, no, I just thought I sent you something to say hello, really. I couldn't write a message on it. It's literally just the image and their address on the back. And so I did all 100 and I got to the end and I'm like, oh, well, that's that then. And then I met Emma Howe from the Minories and we had a kind of chat. We had a mutual friend who's on the board of the Minories and we had a chat and Emma was like, if you had an exhibition, what would you do? And it's one of those, as an artist, you never ever expect to get that as a call because you always have to kind of hassle and hector and try to get your work seen by people. And so I'd had some pieces, collage pieces in a show at a gallery called Fidra Fine Art in Gullen in Scotland. There's the Tatha Gallery up near Dundee. They've shown some of my drawings. But this is all, it's always me as a guest in a group show. And my favourite thing I did was Alan Ray, who runs Fidra Fine Art. He got in touch with all of the artists that were on his books and said, I want you to make some pieces of art in response to artwork in the National Gallery of Scotland. And so I did 2 pieces. I did a drawing of Lady Agnew of Lochnaw by John Singer Sargent, but she had the head of the Monarch of the Glen. So it's a lady in a chair with a stag's head. And that's a lovely drawing. We flogged that. And then the other thing I did was I'd taken a picture of Modern 2, the gallery in Edinburgh. And so I had this really nice, bright digital photo. And I got a print of that. I got an A2 print of that. And then I had 2 copies of the National Gallery of Scotland's catalogue. And I basically tore the whole thing up. And I cut all the people out of all the paintings and the sculptures and the pieces of art in the National Gallery of Scotland. And I just had them all leaving the gallery. And I just called it a day off at the Fringe for the art as a collage, and we flogged that as well. So, and that was it was nice because that's the first time I got a commission, make work around a particular thing, and I really liked doing that. So I was like, so when Emma Howe came to me from the Minories, it's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I'd rather you'd said, do this. But anyway, it was what you want to do. And then I remembered what Celia Byrne had said to me about the Polaroids, these things that I ended up calling sort of half collage, half Polaroid, so I called them Coloroids. And I said, look, I've got these things, they're Polaroid collages of me, and I sent them to everyone during lockdown. And she said, oh, that sounds interesting. And so I sent her photos of a few of them. She said, send some more. And so I ended up sending all 100. And she said, yeah, we'll do that. And then we started talking about how we do it. And then the interesting thing was, she said, right, we'll do a catalogue of it. We'll do a little book of them, but you have to write an essay about why you did it. And so I did this thing. I wrote this piece. And what was brilliant was, in writing the piece, I found out why it was a bit of art. And then she asked me to write another article for a magazine. And when I wrote the article for the magazine, I wrote a sentence in it that said that COVID-19 was a global disaster. And in responding to that, I created a global artwork by sending art all over the world. And Emma sent me an email after saying, well, why didn't you put that in the catalogue? That's the perfect description. And my favourite thing about art is that when you do it, you don't know why you're doing it. You find out later. Not only do you find out later why you did it, you find out later if it was art or not. Because sometimes you didn't make art, you just killed time. And I found out that I had made a bit of art. And it's funny because it's other people saw it before me. Celia Byrne saw it first and said, this is one piece. You've made a bit of art. It took you 3 months. Which is what the funny thing is the last time I worked with Celia Byrne before that, I made a collage that was 8 foot by 4 foot collage of the Scottish artist David Mack. And 3 of us made 4 foot by 8 foot pieces of art about David Mack, and then we set fire to them. So the last time I was Celia Byrne, I burnt my art, and so I was just really glad that she didn't say, what you do is you put it in a gallery in Colchester and then you set fire to it. Right. So yeah, so anyway, so it was that. It started out as something to kill time during lockdown, and it turned into what was my response to lockdown. It was how I kept a big and kind of uncertain world within my grasp, as it were, just was able to kind of concentrate a bit.
Well, I hope our listeners have picked from that. This is going to be a fascinating exhibition to come to. Are any of the works going to be for sale? Or?
Well, no, really. I mean, it's just for you to look at them, and there's some of there's reproductions, so they're blow-ups of the original Polaroids that I took, of the original Polaroids. I should call them Polaroids. It's a good name. And then I've got 17 of the originals that mates. I got in touch with a load of mates and said if you could send them back. Yeah. And you'll be very surprised how many people said, yeah, I don't know where it's in a drawer somewhere. And that's a lovely thing to hear about your art, is that it's in a drawer somewhere. So some of them, it was pride to place on the fridge. Some of them had framed it, it was like, but like I say, I got 17 back. Yeah. And so you'll be able to see then how they actually looked. And I mean, there's a well-known kind of tradition in Polaroid art. I mean, most people know that Andy Warhol was a real devotee of using Polaroid to take portraits because it had Polaroid images, as people know, have a very kind of idiosyncratic look to them. The way that the film reacts, they're usually taken in a kind of amateur way. They look strange, and Warhol picked up on that. So he's like Polaroid portraits, very kind of individual, very. And the thing is the ones that I took of me, some of them are really good photos, and some of them you can't see me. And now the problem is with that model of Polaroid cameras, they don't make new film stock. So all of the film stock that you can buy online is actually old and degrading in quality. So, you take a picture and then it's a bit weird. I mean, that's what I like, the unpredictability of the image.
So that must aid the artistic process, actually.
In a way, yeah. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. But I have, just in case I kind of make any, when I'm here at Colchester, I bought a new Polaroid, one of the newer Polaroid cameras, but that makes it's having the pictures the same size as what I'm after. Yeah. Because there's lots of like instant cameras you can get now that have these little kind of 3" by 1.5" images, these Instax cameras. And I just like that. I love that Polaroid square with a rectangular frame and that gap at the bottom for you to write things on. I quite like that as a...
You still have to wave them in the air to dry them?
Yeah, apparently you mustn't do that.
Oh,
so when you take a Polaroid, you're supposed to turn it over. So the side where it's developing, you mustn't look at it, you've got to keep it out the light. So turn it upside down, and you need to leave it for 10 minutes. And do not turn it back over and look at it in the light, But the image actually consolidates even more over a couple of days. So if you look at a Polaroid you've taken an hour after you've taken it, you go, yeah, that looks great. In 3 days, it's a little bit more. It kind of matures. So I've got one of them now, and I'm going to see what that. I've taken a couple, one bad one good one, and so I'm probably going to be making more of these things and sending them out. I don't know if I do 100 again. I don't know if I've got the money. It's an interesting art career to pursue, but it's not cheap. That's what I used to like about collage. It's cheap. You're tearing up old magazines nobody wants. But if you're taking Polaroids, it's like £12 a pack for the pictures.
You're right. That doesn't going to cost you a bit of money.
Yeah.
Anyway. I just want to remind our listeners when the exhibition on. It's 4th of July starts, which I think is this Saturday. It goes on to the 16th of August. Phil, thank you for taking the time to talk to Cone Radio.
Thank you very much for talking.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed.
This is going to be a great success. And listeners, please go.